Sweet little old lady, I'm not. That's what our keynote speaker said in a documentary CBC television made about her. The documentary described the challenges Dr. Olive Bryanton faced getting her PhD at 82 years of age. Her PhD was about women 85 or older aging in place in rural communities. Dr. Bryanton is a longtime activist for older adults. A friend of mine, who's also a friend of hers, said, in the 40 years I've lived on PEI, Olive has been a force to be reckoned with and a major change maker. Because of her work on aging, she's a sought-after speaker. And recently, she spoke at the UN's World Health Organization. And by the way, the UN has designated this decade, 2021 to 2030, as the decade of healthy aging. Dr. Bryanton is currently working at the University of Prince Edward Island. She's researching patient-centered and community-based programs for older adults with chronic diseases. So now please join me in welcoming Dr. Olive Bryanton.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As you can see by the title, I believe that growing old is a privilege that not everyone has an opportunity to experience. I am one of the fortunate people to have been given the opportunity to experience growing old. I am 84 years of age, and I have been an advocate for older adults for most of my life. I've also been a lifelong learner. So maybe you would consider me a slow learner because I graduated with my PhD from the University of Prince Edward Island 2 years ago at the age of 82. But I feel very fortunate that I was given that opportunity. So next slide. So the goal of this presentation is to provide insights into growing older by sharing some of my own life experiences and by sharing some of what I've learned from the women who were participants in my study. And finally, to recognize how ageism impacts our lives and why we must change the way we speak, feel, and act toward age and aging. So some of the factors that impact the aging process. Growing older is different for everyone. There is no typical older person. Some people who are 80 and older have physical and mental capacities similar to those in their 20s. Other people experience significant decline in physical and mental capacities at a much younger age. A comprehensive healthy aging response must address this wide range of older people's experiences. Growing older, we need to click here. Growing older is linked to the biological processes, which focus on understanding the cellular and molecular processes to better recognize the onset of age-related diseases and to develop interventions to prevent or treat these diseases. Aging is not merely a biological function of the number of years one has lived or the physiological changes the body goes through during the life course. It is a product of the social norms and expectations that apply to each stage in our life. Although some of the variations in older people's health are genetic, much is due to people's physical and social environments, including their homes, their neighborhoods, and the community, as well as their personal characteristics, such as their sex, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. So how do we discern the various ages? Well, in Canada, all people over the age of 18 are considered adults, but there is a large difference between a person age 18 and a person age 45. Thus, more specific breakdowns such as young adult and middle adult were considered helpful. In the same way, groupings are helpful in understanding older people, who are often lumped together from 65 and older. It has been suggested that older adult population be divided into 3 life stage subgroups: the young old, meaning 65 to 74, the middle old, those 75 to 84, and the old is those over 85. But I would suggest that lumping the 85 and older is not practical and should be broken into 2 categories. Maybe those who are 85 and older are the experienced old, and those 95 and older are the old. Many older adults look forward to age as a time to enjoy life without such pressures from the work and family life. Old age may be a time to explore hobbies and activities that there's no time, they had no time for in their earlier life. And they also have this tremendous potential for creativity. But for some older people, old age is not a phase they look forward to. Some people fear old age and will do anything to avoid it. And next, we look at our environments. Many aspects of the aging experience depend on social class, race, gender, and other social factors. The gender imbalance is the sex ratio of men to women, which is increasingly skewed toward women as older people. In present day North America, the society views women as less valuable as men, and the aged as being less valuable than the younger population. Age represents the wealth of life experience that shape who we have become. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the realities of my own aging. This is not one of my favorite topics, but it's my reality. So I'm going to look at my realities in my early years, as I'm going to call it. So my early years were not typical. I was born out of wedlock, as they used to call it, but it happened to many young women, regardless of their social or economic status. Unfortunately, only the women were deemed as at fault. And unless they had a supportive family, life could be very difficult for her and her child. My mother was 20 at the time I was born, and it was decided that her parents would become my day-to-day caregivers. That resulted in me being surrounded by aunts, uncles, grandparents, and great-grandparents, a situation that shaped my future and the career path I have taken. As was typical in the day, I married young at age 19. I have 5 wonderful, successful children, and they all live here on Prince Edward Island. And life went on as expected. I was always interested in nursing, but I did not have the resources needed to train as an RN. So I compromised and enrolled in the nursing assistant program, which was only a year long, and I was sponsored by the PEI hospital. As my older family members were aging, my area of interest in the needs of older adults became an area that I needed to explore. So I decided to further my education. In September of 1980, at the age of 43, I began my undergrad studies. Throughout my 4 undergrad years, it was evident that older full-time and part-time students were given little recognition, support, or voice in their education experience. All focus was on the traditional fresh out of high school students. This motivated me to work with my peers to change the situation. Thus, the Mature and Part-Time University Student Organization was founded, called REBUS. It continues to respond to issues related to being an older student, but now an older student with a voice. By the time I graduated in 1984, my children were moving forward, furthering their own education and beginning their careers. So I too was ready to move forward and begin new adventures. My husband and I were beginning to think about our own future, and we took 2 totally different paths. My husband decided he would retire at the age of 60, and I decided to continue advocacy work for older adults and furthering my education. It was during this time a group of us found the resources we needed to open the Seniors Active Living Center in 1993. It is located in a recreation building beside the university and is totally run by older adults themselves. A little later, I was invited to explore the possibility of creating a seniors college, and I chaired the steering committee to look into that possibility. It was successful, and in affiliation with the University of Prince Edward Island, in 1997, we opened the Seniors College on UPEI. I served as first president. Although the Seniors College is affiliated with the university, it is autonomous and run by older adults and continues to be strong and active, offering courses in all 3 counties of the province. In 1999, I became coordinator at the Center on Health and Aging on campus, and my interest in aging research was growing. In the year 2000, at the age of 63, I received an honorary degree from the University of Prince Edward Island for my advocacy work with older adults and lifelong learning. In 2001, I turned 65. Instead of retiring, I decided to continue my education and applied to do my master's on a part-time basis through the Faculty of Education. So now I'm into 65 years old. And so between my age 65 to 79, I continued to work and study my master's on a part-time basis. My study was about women 70 and older who had to give up driving and the impact that had on their lives. In 2008, I experienced a major life transition. My husband, at the age of 75, suddenly and unexpectedly passed away as a result of a heart attack. Thus, at the age of 72, my life totally changed. I moved in with my youngest daughter. This arrangement has worked well for us. I have someone to cook for, and she has regular meals. Mm-hmm. I graduated with my master's in education in 2009, the year following my husband's death. I think I needed the stress of completing my master's to help me through this unexpected life transition. Although the desire to continue learning by doing my PhD was strong, I avoided pursuing the process because I had internalized ageism, that at my age, I would never be accepted. So why bother trying? I was also afraid that at my age, I would not be able to learn, the myth that older people can't learn new things. even though I knew better. Ageism got me. It took me until 2013 before I convinced myself that I had a right to continue my education. And I spoke with the Faculty of Education Graduate Studies Coordinator. She was very supportive of the idea and encouraged me to apply. I applied in April 2013, and in August, at the age of 76, I found out I was accepted as a PhD student. My younger cohorts and I grew together that first year as we attended classes together and met in my office once or twice a month to draw strength from each other and to know we were not alone in this journey. But beginning in the second year, you are alone. You and your cohorts are exploring your own interests and trying to narrow down your dissertation topic. I was interested in older adults, ageism, and lifelong learning for older adults. In 2014, I had an opportunity to present a paper on older adult learning at a Learning for Older Adults conference in Malta. Knowing that two of my very favorite authors would be at the conference, I took my copy of their textbook with me and had it signed. And it was like meeting rock stars. In 2015, I completed and passed my comprehensive portfolio and was then able to begin working on my own dissertation proposal and ethics application. My proposal was accepted and I received ethical approval in 2016. I am no longer a PhD student, I'm a PhD candidate. And this is where the excitement starts. I'm 79 years old and I'm working with women 85 and older to learn about their realities of growing older in a rural community. What kept me going was my amazing PhD committee of 5 individuals who already had guided me through my student years and were now ready to guide me through this section of my journey. They called themselves Team Olive, and all 5 always found a way to attend committee meetings, and in between committee meetings, my 2 co-supervisors were always there when I needed them. But being very naive, I thought all PhD students had the same type of community support, but I soon found out from other students this was not always the case. I was fortunate to be mentored by this incredible multidisciplinary team. They challenged me, but I needed that to continue doing what I thought sometimes was impossible. So now, finally, I am 80. It is now 2017. I'm 80 years of age, and my life is getting busier and more challenging. In April, I was invited by Dr. Paul Stoley, director of the University of Waterloo Network for Research Aging, to be a keynote speaker at their spring symposium for graduate students. I met this wonderful group of PhD students, and we almost became soulmates because they were involved in aging research, an option that I did not have on my own campus. In July 2017, we had the last event with my study participants. It was our knowledge sharing open house. The participants were there sharing the photographs they contributed to my study. Each woman was there with her 4 photographs depicting what supported or limited their ability to continue aging in place. So when guests arrived, they immediately went to the women to learn about their photographs. One of the guests was the minister responsible for seniors for the province. She spent a long time with each of the women, and 6 months later, she announced a new program for seniors called Seniors Independence Initiative. This initiative provided some financial assistance for practical services to make it easier for older adults to remain in their own home and community. She also officially announced that she was inspired by my study and the opportunity to talk with the women. This was the highlight of my study for me. We had achieved social change. In October in 2017, I presented at the Canadian Association of Gerontology Conference in Winnipeg. At that conference, I met a professor from Brock University who had a friend who was a filmmaker in Halifax. So guess what? After the conference, I get a call from this filmmaker saying she would like to meet with me to discuss doing a documentary for CBC. She came over from Halifax, and I clearly told her I could not do the documentary until I had completed my PhD. But somehow the message did not translate that way to her. As the documentary director, her goal was to do the documentary while I was completing my PhD. Thus, a new challenge was added to my life. And at that time, I was deeply involved with my research, the data analysis, conference presentations, and committee meetings. The film director came over a lot to do filming of various aspects of my life. Sometimes she was alone, but often would arrive with a camera crew. She and her crew attended our committee meetings, family events, presentations I did on campus, the health and wellness strategy for older adults committee that I was serving as an executive advisor was being presented to government, and government accepted it as a working plan. And she even came to a gerontology conference in Vancouver, where I presented a poster. In November of 2018, I was invited to the International Federation Aging Conference in Toronto, where I presented a poster. And all of my costs were covered by the International Federation itself. In December of 2018, I defended my dissertation. It was a stormy winter day, and my external reader was from New Brunswick, and she almost did not make it over in time for my defense. I successfully defended my dissertation with minor revisions. I finished the revisions before the end of the year. I had reached my goal, but celebration would come at my convocation of May 2019. The documentary was still being filmed, and 4 of my study participants were also featured. So it is at this point, the focus was on them. The documentary was completed at my convocation. The documentary called Never Too Old aired on the CBC documentary channel Point of View in August. Since graduation, I continued to be meaningfully involved. Currently, I serve on Age-Well Older Adult and Caregiver Advisory Committee. Through them, I have participated in several webinars, a research project, and I've mentored some grad students at an Age-Well Summer Institute. I have presented virtually to university classes across Canada. I work as a research assistant on a study about diabetes and older adults. I've made presentations to church groups, museums, senior groups, Gerontological Nurse Association, Seniors College, the Women's Network, the Alumni, and the Happy Senior Single Group. I did a interview with New Brunswick or New Brunswick seniors over the radio, and a podcast for an older women's group in England. I was also a presenter at the Nova Scotia Living Lab on Technology and Older Adults. I recently presented at Town Hall for the International Federation on Aging, and as Helena had mentioned, I was invited by the World Health Organization to represent older persons at the launching of the recent Healthy Aging Report, the Decade of Healthy Aging, 2021 to 2030. Unfortunately, due to COVID, I was not able to be in Geneva in person, but was there virtually and was given 2 opportunities to speak in the agenda. The Never Too Old documentary was entered into the Charlottetown Film Festival and was chosen as the top documentary. In September 2020, I was the recipient of the Order of PEI for Outstanding Citizenship and Excellence. Life grows more exciting and busier with each passing year, and I am blessed to continue having good health. The next slide. So my purpose for my study was to learn about the lived reality of women age 85 and older who were living in rural communities. Their participation in my study took place over an 8-month period and required approximately 20 hours of their overall time. These women demonstrated the capability of different age groups working together to support each other and their communities. So my study participants were women 85 and older living in rural communities. They had to have the dexterity needed to take pictures. They had to have the ability to describe their pictures. They had to be willing and able to attend 2 4-hour group meetings, and they had to provide their own transportation to do that. They also had to agree to participate in the knowledge sharing open house, which I mentioned, but we always provided lunch for each of the group meetings. So slide 6, learning from life experiences. We have learned that you must wear your years with pride, like a badge of honor. You have conquered, you have thrived, you have survived. And now I want you to see the wonderful women that I had worked with throughout my study. I'm just going to mention one thing about each one. So I'm going to start with the lady on the right on the bottom. She was had been recently widowed. She and her husband had always been very involved in the community, and she was going through her husband's papers and cataloging them with the Dewey system to put them in their local community center to have them archived there. The next lady was, she was married, but she was very much a caregiver. Her husband was in the wheelchair. She was also having some health issues herself. She had was having hip problems, and between our first group meeting and second group meeting, she whipped off to the hospital, had a hip replacement, and was back and into our came to our meeting. The next lady came to Prince Edward Island as a bride of 1 week. She and her husband were from Holland. They had married. His mother had given them a piece of land, but not enough to make a living. So they came to PEI as a young married couple. They had 10 children, very successful. They were successful farmers, and all their children have been successful. She was also widowed, and one of the more frail people in my study. Beside her is another older woman who was also a widow. She suffered from osteoporosis, and had broken almost every bone in her body. But she was totally amazing. You can see she's using a cane, but she also used a wheelchair. She was the other person who was more frail in my study. Right behind her is a lady who was very witty. She was an artist, and she also played the piano. She loved the shock factor. She loved talking about sex. And actually, she lived in a senior subsidized housing apartment. In the country, there are very small apartments, and the one she was living in was a 6-unit, and she was the only woman. The rest were all men, so she was in her element. The next lady she was married, and she and her husband had retired from farming, and their son had taken over, but they were still living in the farm home. She had had a stroke, but was doing well, was doing most of her own housework again, and was back out in the community doing her work. The next lady, while she was doing my study, she turned 91, and to celebrate that, she went up in a hot air balloon. She also always cut her own lawn with a ride-on John Deere tractor. This next lady also celebrated her birthday in a different, unique way. She always went on a road trip with one of her sons on the back of a motorcycle. Actually, when we had our knowledge sharing open house, she arrived at the open house on the back of the motorcycle. The next lady was very different. She had married 4 times. She had 7 children. They were all by the first husband, who was a dreamer, and she was responsible to make sure those children had a roof over their head and food in their tummy. She was an amazing woman. And then the final lady, this one was the Energizer Bunny. She was involved in everything. She was either writing proposals or she was organizing things that were going on. She loved doing history. She worked outside of the home as well as inside. And she loved her computer. She did all her banking online. Unfortunately, this lady is no longer with us. She died in 2022. And next, these are just some pictures of what the women had submitted and what the minister had seen when she came to her open house. Living in the country, of course, a car is very important. Living on the country with a long lane, it's important that you have a great neighbor who brings your newspaper in for you. Also, if you're living in a fairly large house, it's important that you can have someone come in to do the cleaning for you. Living in a small community, in a rural community, the organizations you're involved with are usually small. So this lady always invited people to have the meetings at her house because she had no transportation. This is showing a couple of people in having a game of cards with her. This next picture was showing the benefits of family and how important it is to have family to support you as you're aging in place. This lady loved to sew. She did have a caregiver in the morning and again in the afternoon. And so they would get her sewing machine out for her. And she loved making baby quilts. So anybody in her community or surrounding communities had a new baby, they were always gifted with one of her lovely little baby quilts. This one is depicting what she was doing for herself to improve her health. She was not a medication taker, so she was having problems with her legs, and she bought herself one of these machines, which is a circulation machine. And she told me that it helped her legs, and she was very proud of herself that she didn't have to go on medication. This picture was depicting what some people had to do because of the winter. Now, if you lived on the side of the highway, you can see how the snow would build up even against your house. So this lady, in order to maintain her home, she had to hire a tractor to clean this out so it was possible for the oil truck to get in to fill her furnace oil. And also she had to hire a different person to clean her driveway and another person to clean up her deck. So for her, winter was an expensive time of year. This next picture, this young man is a grandson of the lady who had her hip done. And she said she couldn't have gotten along without him. This young man has some mental challenges, but he always came and went shopping with her. So there he is bringing in the groceries. And then this a final one is a picture of the artist, and this is her home. And she was an amazing woman to know, as were they all. So what did I learn by listening? The next slide. The women revealed a diversity in their variations in age, their marital status, the number of children, their education, their socioeconomic situation, and their housing options. They also showed that they maintained their personal convictions. For example, one of the women had taken all the number of classes she needed to get her degree at the university, but because she refused to take a required math course, the university would not grant her degree. And they also revealed a variety of circumstances, environments, and sensitivities. And one of the major things was showing the importance of interdependency and reciprocity. Most older adults do not like to ask for help. So they found that if they were able to give back, that provided them the opportunity for reciprocity. So they were very happy to share what they had and to be able to receive support. So next. So growing older isn't the problem. Ageism is. Ageism is rooted in a cultural belief that aging is all negative and that we must hide signs of aging at all costs. But that attitude must change. So next slide. So what is ageism? Ageism is stereotyping, and that is how we think about aging. For example, younger people often assume that older individuals have had their turn and should make way for the younger generation. Ageism is prejudice, and that is a baseless and often negative preconception or attitude toward older adults. And ageism is all discrimination, and that is how we act toward older adults. So in reality, we do have to do something about ageism. So here are some ways to reduce ageism. Next slide. We must recognize ageism and raise public awareness about it. We must speak up. If we hear something ageist, we must say something about it and consider pointing it out. We need to seek out older people for their knowledge and opinions, showing that they are valued and respected. You know, maybe we just need to ask them for one of their recipes that you absolutely love. You might need to get advice from them about how to garden or what they did to make things better in their own community. You also have to promote independence and control over decision making. You know, when you go to, you take an older family member to the doctor and or the health facility, and they keep looking at you to answer their questions, that would be taking control away from the older adult if you answered the questions instead of the people who really needed to. Next slide. Oh, we need to be inclusive and promote intergenerational contact and intervention. And ageism does come with a price. It's costing us intergenerational solidarity. Now the next slide. We do have choices. We can choose fear, dread, or shame, or we can meet ageism head on and truly look around us to see what growing older really reveals. Old age is a category that we all hope to join one day by virtue of continuing to live our lives. But don't you think it's rather odd that we live in a society that actively supports prejudice against a group to which we all hope to belong to one day? Next slide. Some of my key messages are that everyone will encounter old age sometime, barring premature death. Older adults, regardless of their functional abilities, have capacities and strengths that can be enhanced to support healthy aging. Older adults must be the center of any decisions related to their lives, and older adults must be visible and have their voices heard. We must listen to the voices of older people to learn and understand what matters most to them in their daily lives. And next slide. Together, let's together oppose ageism. Intergenerational programs are designed to bring people together in purposeful, mutually beneficial activities which promote greater understanding and respect between generations. Thank you very much.
Olive, thank you very much. We're going to go to some questions right now, but I just want to tell you, I was so inspired by what you said, especially, you know, we have choices. I'm just going on and off the screen a bit because I made notes while you were talking. I made a lot of notes. So I'm going to start off, and ladies and gentlemen, please, if you want to ask all of some questions, you know, the drill is go to the agenda, then go to Olive in the agenda, then click View Session, and you will see the questions and answers on the side. So I was struck by what you said about growing older is different for everybody. And I believe it is as well. But did you find in all of your studies and work, and especially with the women, do you find that there is something that is ubiquitous for all of us as we age, apart from the fact that, we're getting older?
Well, I think one of the things we all suffer as we grow older is ageism. And it has a tremendous impact on our lives. And some of us are able to move beyond that ageism and continue living our life as we should live it. Others are not able. So I think that is something that, as human beings, we do have to do something about ageism, and we do have to start now. We have the choice.
You know what, Olive, like we're in a pandemic, and one of the buzzwords for the pandemic has always been be kind to each other, be kind to each other.
Yeah.
So don't you think this applies to our older adults in terms of how we view them, right?
Yeah, how we view them, how we think about them, and how we treat them. It's just and we have to realize that we're an intergenerational society. And as an intergenerational society, we have the power to make a society that encompasses all generations.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of our speakers later on is going to talk about how the boomers, people from my generation, are getting older and older and older. So there's going to be a lot of people over the age of 65 pretty soon. So, I mean, I would think that this is very important in the intergenerational model, that we learn to, and this is what this conference is all about, right? How we learn to harness the skills, the trade, the knowledge, the wisdom of our older adults.
Well, not only are we an aging population, but the boomers starting this year have reached the age of 75. So, we're only going to be continuing to be an older aging population. Yeah. And yes, we do have to harness that energy, that creativity that older people bring to our society, simply through the experience of living life.
Exactly. Well said. I'm just going to look at my other computer. I've got 3 computers on the go here, Olive. And I'm going to look, there some questions are coming in. And one question, is it normal to worry about dying because people younger than oneself are dying?
Well, I don't think it is normal to worry about dying. I think older adults are so busy living that they don't have time to worry about dying. I mean, dying is a part of life. And if we look at life as life stages, it's the end stage of our life. And if we are fortunate, by the time we get there, we'll have accomplished all the things that we have set out for ourselves to do. And I think people don't worry about dying. What I hear from a lot of people is it's not the dying they worry about, it's the pain they may have to deal with while dying. So I think that's very important too, that we deal with end of life issues.
Yes, that's so important too. Next question is, what is one thing that we all can do to address ageism?
We can check ourselves to see how often we will say something or do something that depicts ageism. For example, a friend is having a birthday and we send them one of those terrible cards that say how sorry they are they've gotten another year older, when we should be saying, how lucky are we to have lived yet another year. Or if we forget something, and we say, oh, I'm having a senior's moment. Well, are we calling it that? All of our lives, we've forgotten things. I remember one time putting the teapot in the fridge, and I was probably 30. I didn't think I was having a senior moment. I just laughed it off and thought, I've got too much on my mind today.
It's true. And you know what, all of what you're talking about are really subtle things, you know, and they're reaching us at a deeper level, not at the conscious level, so that we are perpetuating this myth.
And we're internalizing that myth as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I haven't put my tea kettle in the fridge yet, but I'm telling you, I've done something very big. Olive, here's a comment, not a question, but a comment. And what an amazing woman she is. She has given me hope for the future. I'll soon be 67. Oh, this is for this questioner. Wendy, you're still a spring chicken at 67, but I haven't.
A baby.
A baby, that's right. She's just a baby. But I haven't been too hopeful for the future. I too love learning, but I'm afraid to put myself out there. Thank you so much. So I think you were an inspiration to her. Here's another comment. Indigenous communities appear to treat and respect their elders differently than non-Indigenous community. Is it because non-Indigenous communities focus on the utility of people in an economic context? That question, that's a good question.
Okay, yes, I do believe that the Indigenous community have much more respect for their older adults, and not just their own older adults, but older adults like myself. I remember being in a lineup at a conference, and this young Indigenous woman was ahead of me, and we were chatting on the way through. And when we got closer and closer to the food, she seemed to be getting a little bit more agitated. And finally she said, look, do you mind if I go behind you? I just don't feel comfortable in taking the food before you. And I thought that was such a sweet thing, and what a wonderful young woman she was to be thinking in that way.
This one from Emily, and if I haven't read your name before, it's because it's hard to see on this computer. Thank you. I agree ageism is a discriminatory idea. It's a problem. I also see policy discrimination. Ageism is often not legally recognized as discrimination, i.e. people are forced into retirement. I've even had a friend emigrate from Australia who was having difficulties because she was considered old in her early 40s. Oh my goodness. How do we fight systemic ageist policies?
Well, I think we need to point them out. I'm happy that on our campus, you no longer have to retire at 65, which I think is a major step forward, because a lot of professors, for example, when they reach 65, they're really just getting into, you know, what they have learned. They've had their education, now they've had the experience. So they're really coming into their own, and to force them to retire, it's wrong. I think people should have a choice. Like my husband chose to retire at 60. I still haven't retired, but we each had our own choice, and I think retirement should be a choice. I think we are finding that pressure is being put on older adults to continue working because there are not enough younger people coming up through the system to maintain. So, you know, we're still valuable, but we don't have to be working to be valuable.
Yes, exactly. Now I'm in the situation, my husband's retired and I'm not, and I don't think I will be, you know, because I love to work. Now here's a question, and we will have A couple more questions before we go on our break. Olive, can you talk a little bit more about intergenerational solidarity?
I think intergenerational solidarity is extremely important. We need to work together. We need to realize that all generations have something to give. I remember one time at the Seniors Active Living Center, we were doing an intergenerational project with, actually it was with international Rotary students. And so they were coming to the center and together, they and the seniors were producing a program for down the road. So they were doing skits together. They all worked together. And I think the second time they came to the center, CBC came. And I remember CBC asking this young man from Australia, so what did you think when you found out you're going to be working with older adults? He immediately said, boring. But I mean, the boring didn't last. Actually, I'm still in contact with that young man. And, you know, after that, he never thought it was boring. But it was amazing. The very first time, I don't know who was more afraid of who. Was it the seniors afraid of the older adults, or afraid of the students, or the students afraid of the older adults? But it didn't take very long when age wasn't even an issue. They were just having fun together.
Yeah, and it just takes working together. Olive, I want to, Dr. Bryanton, I just want to call you Olive. I feel
that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you. You've inspired us so much. What I'm going to take away is where your years with pride, you have conquered, thrived, and survived, and we did. Thank you so much for this session and for opening up our conference. It was wonderful and inspirational. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure indeed.